So TED has a very special place in my heart. I gave this TED talk a while ago. I like to remind my kids it's got a couple of million clicks, and you really should click it a few more times. But along the way, one of the people that clicked it was a very brilliant and very passionate ballerina and choreographer who asked me if she could write a ballet about regenerative medicine, which was the topic of that TED talk. History is very long, but my love for TED is unmatched because we fell in love and got married, and she's right here today. So I'm very delighted to be here, and I would never say no to do anything for TED. I'm going to talk today not so much about regenerative medicine and not so much about the details of any one area of science and technology, but really more about skimming the surface of how science and technology interfaces with medicine and with healthcare. And I'm really going to posit this question of how has technology helped so far in terms of improving our health, and not really so much an individual's health as the population's health. And for the future, what does that look like, and what are some of the most exciting things, and what does it mean for us and what we should do? Really what we're talking about is how in the future we might be able to really unleash and unlock the power of science and engineering and technology and use it to deliver health. If you look back over the last 50 years, something everybody could agree on is that there's incredible technology that's being developed. This chart here is just a sequence of 50 years of invention. Things from the defibrillator to artificial organs to regenerative medicine to also to different imaging systems. These things have been driving our perception of incredibly good health, especially here in the United States, for many, many years. In fact, if you think about this list and this sort of innovation engine that's been taking place, it's sort of the foundation of why we think our population's health is so good. You'll often hear in the media and from many figures in politics that American healthcare is the best in the world. And there is no doubt that technology and availability to that technology is better in the United States than anywhere in the world. But there's kind of an ugly truth about how that technology and how science and engineering interfaces with real healthcare. The reality is that from a population standpoint, that technology has not actually driven big changes in the quality, the accessibility, and the simplicity of healthcare, at least until now. And actually, if you look at any kind of ranking, this one's from the Commonwealth Fund that ranks population health statistics of all countries or major countries in the world, what you see is this big disconnect. We have incredible technology, incredible science and engineering, but it doesn't drive changes in population health. So there's really no disruption that's taken place. What you actually see here, and I didn't put this up because I'm biased, the UK actually leads in some of these population statistics. The US is generally towards the bottom of any list in that regard. So why is that? What is it that prevents what's called disruptive innovation from taking root in healthcare? Disruptive innovation is just doing something that is more accessible, better, and simpler, and it can change a market. You're all probably using cell phones, holding cell phones. You know, that changes an entire marketplace, in that case in communication. This takes place again and again and again. But in healthcare, it's really been a much more steady development of technology without this massive disruption, without this incredible leap forward. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and it turns out the bar is kind of low, surprisingly low. Just for instance, 100,000 deaths as a result of medical errors using all that great technology per year in the United States. That's the equivalent of a 747 jet crashing every day for an entire year. So technology, fabulous. Use of technology, everybody's very well-intentioned, but not necessarily driving great change. Only the construction industry, as an industry, ranks below healthcare, according to a McKinsey study recently, in terms of decreases in productivity with increases in employment costs. So that's maybe some sobering news, some things that you didn't necessarily know before. But what's changing? Is there something in the air today that's a little bit different? And I think there is, and I think it's phenomenally exciting for the future of healthcare. And, if you think about the companies that we know of today and what's happening, the largest taxi company in the world has no cars. The largest hotel has no beds, Airbnb. The largest news provider of news content has no writers, right? It's Facebook and Twitter. And I could go on. So the question evolves in terms of healthcare and technology of whether it's a case of when, not whether, there will be doctors with no hospitals, hospitals with no doctors, pharmacies with no pills, pills that actually work. That would be nice. I've been taking pills for a couple of weeks to try and get rid of bronchitis, and I can tell you, I would really like a pill that works. What are these pieces of technology that might drive the kind of change that I just talked about, and the kind of disruptive science and technology that could change everything? What I'm going to do is just in a series of sort of dips into different areas of science and engineering, show you just a couple of those things that I think are perhaps most exciting. And I'm going to begin with the thing that's really driven Uber and Airbnb and Facebook and Twitter, and that's computers. And talk a little bit about this area of computational health, or what some people like to think of as doctorless medicine. It's almost unthinkable, right, that we could have doctorless medicine. Vino Kosler, who's a renowned investor from Silicon Valley, who made his wealth by investing in computational science and engineering, is now shifting his focus to healthcare. And this is a famous quote of his where he says, by 2025, 80% of the functions doctors do will be done better and cheaper by machines and algorithms. I don't know that I agree with the 80%, but I do agree that he's really onto something in that computer science and engineering is at a place now where it's almost unimaginable what you can do and how it's possible. So perhaps it's difficult to do these things, but inevitable that it will take place. Let me just explain how difficult it is from a computational health perspective. So what we're really talking about is, could you go to your cell phone, type in what you feel, your symptoms, and have your cell phone tell you what's wrong and what to do about it, right? That's doctorless medicine. The answer, by the way, is you can do it today. You might not get a very good answer, but if you literally just type in symptoms, you don't have to do any website. Just go to Google, type in a series of symptoms, press go, and you'll get, within the first few clicks, you'll get a number of websites that will tell you what the chances are that you've got any one of a number of different issues and give you some sense of what to do about it. As I said, I'm not sure I'd value the response yet, but still. So difficult but inevitable. How difficult? One emergency room physician in one shift today in an electronic health record-dominated system will do 5,000 clicks, right? So they're clicking around the whole time. A complex patient will have 1,000 pages in their health record for a given stay, as much as 1,000 pages, and over a long period of time can have as many as 10,000 pages. What's interesting is that today, doctors, to make an ideal decision on what's wrong, will need to spend 2 to 3 minutes reviewing that electronic health record and understanding it. So it's not surprising that the idea is there in people's minds that maybe a computer could really help. One inpatient visit to the hospital for one day typically involves around 500 decisions being made about that person and their care for one day. So computers perhaps can help with that. Not too long ago, just about a decade ago, a very famous economist at MIT, Frank Levy, in 2004, made this statement about the driverless cars, basically saying you couldn't develop the technology that would allow a car to drive itself, right? It just wasn't feasible because it's too difficult. By the way, the reason he said is that the left-hand turn would be impossible for a computer to come up with a set of rules. I think we're all aware that today Google's driverless car has driven over 1.5 million miles down in California. And what you may not be aware is it's only been involved in 3 crashes, and each one of those crashes it was rear-ended. So, computers can actually do this incredible, complex, rule-based work, and I think we will see this taking place more and more. Another area of interesting use of computers being developed right here in Pittsburgh. Dr. Sham Tucker at the Allegheny Health Network, in collaboration with Yang Kai at Carnegie Mellon, is using computers to analyze a colonoscopy picture. Why? Even though when you're one of the best in doing colonoscopies, which he is, it turns out that every now and again you miss a polyp in the colon. The whole point of the colonoscopy is to find the polyp. So he's developing a computer system in collaboration with Yang that, as the colonoscopy is being done, will help him understand what the quality of that exam is and help him find the polyps. Interestingly, Yang Kai developed the technology first to find improvised explosive devices from drones. So it's this leap where computer technology is working fast enough, doing complex analyses that can help physicians do their job. Going back again in computational healthcare to an area that you've probably heard of, IBM Watson, the computer that won Jeopardy, is probably most famous for. Now IBM is really driving that computer towards healthcare. They've set up a big division. They're collaborating with Apple, J&J, and Medtronic. And today, already, IBM Watson is diagnosing and advising physicians on what the right care is for oncology at places like the Mayo Clinic and all over the country. It's a big change. It was all really based off a study, a clinical trial that was done that proved that IBM Watson actually did a better job of prescribing medications to cancer patients than some of the best oncologists in the country. How does it do it? It reads the entire medical literature, understands it, and then uses that information with the information that's given about a patient, and it really can read the 10,000 pages of notes if it has to, and understand what the best next step is. So I think you'll see IBM Watson and all of the other computational healthcare companies really creating change in healthcare, very Uber-like and Airbnb-like in the next probably 5 years. Another thing that I'll just throw out is the idea of cures versus treatments. So today, most of the pills we take, most of what pharma has produced, treats our symptoms but doesn't cure our disease, especially complex, difficult diseases that are quite devastating. This is changing. The more we understand about science, the more we understand about biology, the better our chances are to actually intervene and do something quite dramatic. A really good example of this occurred just last year with the development and final release of a drug sold under the brand name Sovaldi. I don't have any stock in any of the companies I'm talking about, by the way. It's the most successful drug launch in the last decade, $10.3 billion of sales in its first year. Sovaldi treats hepatitis C, but it doesn't just treat it, it cures it. Interestingly, it's a relatively inexpensive drug to make. They charge $80,000 per patient to use it. And there's now quite a big controversy over when should you use it. So hepatitis C is one of those diseases that takes decades to cause a problem for a patient. But if you get hepatitis C, should you be given the drug today, or should you wait until you're sick before you take the drug? Interesting things, but now more and more drugs are becoming available that do something that they just really didn't do before, and that's actually cure disease. Another area is the area that I talked before at TED about, and that's regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine is this idea of taking the body's own ability to heal itself. We're all very familiar that if we cut ourselves, we heal. We're familiar of all of the animals that are out there that can heal themselves. So taking the body's innate ability to heal itself and then accelerating that to a clinically relevant timescale so that you can regenerate lost function in organs and tissues and repair and replace body parts like never before. One has to bring together a host of different disciplines, and for a long time, people have said, regenerative medicine is very exciting, but are you ever actually really going to cure something, really knock it out of the park? This is just one example coming up next of how to do that. It's a study that was just released this year by Novartis, and it's called CART therapy. The idea is pretty straightforward. If you have cancer, your cancer cells perhaps will have subtle differences between them and the rest of the cells in your body. So the question is, can you take cells from a patient who has cancer and engineer them so that when you inject them back into the body, they recognize that tumor and destroy it and recognize it as foreign? CART therapy is an example of cell-based therapy, regenerative medicine. In this case, really regenerating the immune system in a way through immunoengineering that the immune system does what you would have hoped it would have done in the first place. They reported in this study, it's a small study, just I think 15 to 18 patients, a complete cure rate from leukemia of 90% with the study that they did. There's a lot of excitement about this kind of therapy as it moves forward. Regenerative medicine isn't just about injecting cells and getting cells to do exciting things, but also about the idea of growing tissues in a laboratory and using them to replace lost functioning tissues in a person. This is a picture of a human trachea. It's a beautiful story of global science. So the trachea was grown in Bath, England, by a team of scientists from Spain and implanted then this human lab-grown trachea into a patient in Sweden. The patient did well, did okay, and the procedure has been done now a couple of additional times, and they're really learning how to go about replacing tracheas. One final example from right here in Pittsburgh is the work of Blair Jobe. Dr. Blair Jobe is the head of thoracic surgery and the Esophageal Institute at the Allegheny Health Network. And he's doing this really pretty remarkable study to treat precancer in esophageal cancer. So if the esophagus gets a tumor, it's very, very devastating, and there really are no cures for that. So his idea is, what can I do about that? He came up with a real leap of engineering and science, which was the idea of, I'll just resurface the esophagus. I'll find a way to engineer a device that will pull out the inside of the esophagus in one big piece, and then I'll go back down in there, and I'll reline it, just like resurfacing a road, and I'll remove anything that's bad. I'll be able to look very carefully at it, and I'm going to show you a video now of the inside of an esophagus that has one of these lesions, how he removed it. So, there's a little bit of blood and guts here if you want to start the video. So what you're seeing here is, you can switch the sound off. Thank you. Maybe you can't switch it off. I'll compete with the sound. So as the video runs, what you're seeing is the removal of that inner lining. What you see there is the inner lining of a human esophagus that's been removed during this relatively simple procedure. It's just like peeling a sock off, but imagine peeling it off through the inside of the leg. He does that, and then what you see there is a fully functioning normal esophagus about 6 months later. He's done this here in Pittsburgh on about 15 to 20 patients, and now in an FDA-approved clinical trial, he's driving this forward. So the future is arriving really quickly in regenerative medicine. Things are moving unbelievably fast. Tens of thousands of transplants, thousands of clinical trials, 700 regenerative medicine companies around the world that are sort of investing and driving technology in this space, all with the idea of doing something that we really just couldn't have imagined doing before, which is regenerating and restoring lost function. Another area of science that will change the world and already is beginning to change the world is the idea of diagnostics that actually work, right? So we all know we get lab tests, And then we go back to the doctor looks at the lab test results, they're like, I think you have this, this, and this, so we'll try this experiment to see if you really did have it, and then it doesn't work, and then you go back, you get more lab tests, et cetera, et cetera. You may have heard of the X Prize. A lot of people that know about TED know about X Prizes. There was a tricorder X Prize that's really looking at the Star Trek tricorder and how, could we actually develop such a thing? These things are now really present and part of life and beginning to work. This is a picture of a device called a SIFT machine. SIFT was a company that deployed systems to detect explosives in airports from Australia, made in New Zealand. And what they actually do now is you blow into this machine and it measures your health. It can tell from your breath what a lot of lab tests would do. Many of you may have heard of at-home diagnostics. The whole diagnostic world, the science of diagnostics, is dramatically changing every day. And so very exciting things here. If you had diagnostics that could work for you at home, you really can change the way you interact with the healthcare system, because the first set of steps can all be done in the comfort of your own home. Nanomedicine is a really interesting space, this interesting area of how nanotechnology and microtechnology and engineering weaves its way into medicine. One of the things that many people have heard about is pills that are smart in some way. Some of you may have even used some of those pills to take images as you swallow the pill, and it goes through your intestinal tract, it takes pictures and then reports back. There's actually a really interesting company that's out there called Proteus that makes RFID-tagged pills. So I said before that Sovaldi cost $80,000 per patient for a few pills. Those pills are pretty valuable. And if you're paying for those pills, you'd like to know they've been taken and that they were taken on time. So this whole area of medication compliance is a big issue. So this company came along with an idea. We'll just put a little chip on a pill, and then you'll wear a patch. When you swallow the pill will begin to dissolve. That will send a signal through the RFID chip to the patch, and the patch will tell a smart device, yes, the pill's been taken, when it was it taken in the right amount, and was it the right pill? Medication adherence is a really big issue, by the way. So for most of us, I can't actually see out there, but if we did a show of hands and said how many people took a pill on time as they were supposed to, the number would be small, right? Probably as low as 10% of people actually complete and take their pills exactly on time. So you might think, well, this is very far-fetched, right? It will take a long time to develop. Within the last year or two, the FDA approved, so it's already in use, the use of these RFID-tagged pills for heart failure, Alzheimer's, and transplant patients. It's already happening. It's already changing the way that people interface with healthcare. If you think about our health, 3 groups of people affect our health and wealth security. Our providers, so our teams of doctors, the people that pay the bills, our insurance companies, and us. The insurance companies and the doctors have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do a better job. For us, as individuals, through this kind of technology, we can begin to be better patients, more compliant, doing the things that we're supposed to do to keep ourselves healthy. And I'll just finish up with the genome, right? The sequencing of the human genome and our understanding of biology. Genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, I tend to call it pan-omics. This omic revolution opens the door to personalized care that's really designed for us. So the human genome, this is just a map here with a bunch of diseases listed on it, and the larger the size of the circle, the more we know about the genes that drive those diseases. And my point here is that the map is full. We really are beginning to understand how the genetic sequence that is in each of us couples in to the challenges we face from a health perspective as time goes by. If that's the case, if we really do understand that connection and that encyclopedia almost of information, then when something happens, we can just turn to the right page in the encyclopedia, go down to the issue, and figure out, okay, for me, I want to treat that disease this way. This is having a phenomenal impact on the treatment of cancer in particular. People are beginning to understand that cancer is not a geography-dependent disease. So we know, we think of a tumor in the breast as breast cancer, right? But it's quite possible, and genetics is showing that actually some tumors in the breast are ovarian tumors. They're tumors that have the biology of different regions, different things. And if we understand that, we can sequence the DNA in those tumors, we can understand then how to treat it. What's really interesting and phenomenally exciting, I think, is the cost of doing this today is within reach, right? So not too long ago, the first human genome that was sequenced cost $100 million to sequence. Today, it only costs $1,000 per person to sequence their genome. And maybe tomorrow, 500, maybe more. Many of you have heard of Moore's Law, which sort of governs the increase in computer speed over time. The decrease in the cost of sequencing the genome is way in excess of Moore's Law. It's probably the most exciting set of developments that have happened in science and engineering. So with that, I'm just going to finish by saying that the past is clear to us. We all live the past, right? The past is symptoms that we get. It's treatments that are based off diseases with a few measurements here and there. The future is using the kinds of technologies, the kind of science and engineering that I just talked about. And for many of you in the room, you represent the future. I encourage you to commit yourselves to getting deeply involved in the science and engineering that can drive this kind of change. A lot of people say that this kind of change will come slowly. I just want to end with this 20-second story. So the status quo is strong. I've listed it here. It's big pharma, it's big medical devices, it's hospitals. That's the status quo. Very strong. It's just as strong as this bridge. This bridge is built in the Honduras. It's called the Choluteca Bridge. And Honduras is a place where there are lots of hurricanes. And every time a hurricane came to Honduras, it would blow down all the bridges. They would spend a lot of time, a lot of tragedy involved in rebuilding their infrastructure and their bridges. So they built this bridge over the Choluteca Bridge, over this big river in the Honduras. And it represents everything that our big hospitals, our big machines, big pharma represents. It is the status quo. It was designed to resist any kind of disruptive force you could imagine. And the nature of disruptive force is such that it can do surprising things, however. So when Hurricane Mitch came along, some of you are probably thinking, okay, the bridge is going to fall down. But disruption doesn't work quite that way. The way disruption works is that the river moves. Right? The bridge becomes less relevant, right? Less useful. So big pharma, big devices, big hospitals, they'll always have a role. But this kind of science and engineering that I've talked about changes that role and can change it very quickly, sometimes overnight. So with that, I'll stop, and thank you very much again for coming, and Happy TED is underway.
Thank you, Dr. Allen.